Now, in this first session, we have looked at the initiative on blue numbers and how it can support the implementation of SDG goal number 2, knowing that number 2 is connected with other goals, that it's about sustainable agriculture, it's about rural development, it's about sustainable production and consumption practices. And we have looked at the benefits or the actions that are necessary at the level of governments, at the level of the private sector, at the level of international organizations for this to work. Now, we are now going to zoom in on a region for which agriculture, food security, rural development, trade in agricultural products, agricultural value chains are extremely important. This is the ASEAN region. In order to do that, we are very lucky to have the Minister of Agriculture from the government of Vietnam, Mr. Cao Duc Pat, to my left. Thank you, Minister, for being with us. We have Mr. Lee Luong Ming, Secretary General of ASEAN. Thank you for being with us. But we also wanted to start this session by taking a bit of altitude and thinking in particular on what is happened in Milano over the year with the expo devoted precisely to food and agricultural products, to sustainability, to food security, and doing that with Linda Lanzillotta, who's the Vice President of the Senate of the Republic of Italy. Linda, thank you very much for being with us. And we are going to start with her. We are doing this session together in partnership, UN Global Compact, International Trade Center, Women in Parliament. As you know, parliaments are extremely important. It starts with legislators making sure that the policies are the right policies, that the laws are the right laws. So with this little an introduction and without further ado, I'm going to give Linda the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. It's a great pleasure. It's a great honor for me. So food security, as we are all aware, is a key issue in southern countries of the world. But the awareness is increasing that this is no longer just a problem of poor countries. It's all too apparent that it's now and will be even more in future decades the global issue, the consequences of which will have profound effects on the political, economic, and social growth of developed countries. Hunger, malnutrition, and the diseases they generate are destroying entire generations of children and are the root causes of wars and the huge flow of refugees and immigrants that we are now witnesses in Europe. This is why Italy decided to devote the Universal Exposition Milan 2015 on feeding the planet. This is the global challenge that we have to tackle, and we have to tackle it all together. According to the World Food Summit 1996 declaration, food security is achieved when all people at all times have a physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. This is exactly the SDG number 2, which calls for a comprehensive approach. As you know very well, Asia grew from 1990 to 2010 at an average of 7.6% a year, which is more than double the 3.4% world average. But the Asian experience confirms that even a robust and steady economic growth, although being a key factor in the sharp decline of poverty and malnutrition, is not sufficient by itself to ensure food security. On the contrary, sometimes huge and rapid economic growth can even have negative effects in terms of rapid population growth, increased demand for food, and, as a consequence, more intensive production, environmental pollution, and climate change. So we must adopt specific and detailed policies for a really sustainable growth. In this connection, I would like to focus today very briefly on two elements of this comprehensive approach. Firstly, the potential role we mentioned before in all intervention of local small agricultural enterprises. Secondly, the very close link existing between the fight against hunger and for food security and the achievement of gender equality. In other words, within the SDG number 2 and number 5. And I want to mention an Italian experience. Ensuring access to food and water as a universal right means ensuring a balanced development of the land in which agricultural and environmental resources are developed, preventing them from being taken away from the population, thereby impoverishing local economies and or irreversibly altering local ecosystems. We have even seen an example of the economic and especially social value of regaining control of land formerly in the hand of various, oftentimes illegal powers in Sicily. There, young people, and within them many young girls, have established small agricultural cooperatives focused on tilling the land sites from criminal organization and leased by the government to these cooperatives for agricultural production. This is a way to prove that fighting crime, also by reappropriating land and fostering agricultural micro-businesses, can provide a future prospect for economic growth and employment that will stitch the social fabric back together and halt an exodus from areas that would otherwise fall victim to poverty, unemployment, and dependence on crime. Therefore, we need to return to the very roots of life in order to create the general conditions for justice and make other goals achievable for the balanced and sustainable growth identified by the United Nations. Governments have to promote and to incentivize science and history, to invest in order to make sure that in countries affected by poverty and endemic malnutrition, and as well in the many regions which have the same conditions in so said rich countries, very often also in Italy, the technologies and achievement of science in agriculture and medicine are used for food production, water collection, and renewable energy. This must be accompanied by sustainable financing in the form of microcredit, which women have already very profitably used in several countries to support the creation of small local businesses capable of jump-starting a virtuous economic process. This model of agricultural development shows, as I mentioned earlier, how SDG 2 is closely linked to SDG 5, which aims for global growth in the role of women. This is indicated not merely as a goal for justice and non-discrimination between people of different gender, but also as a means to overcome the gender gap and thus promote sustainable development. This is because women are bearers of a vision that looks at the future, a sensitivity for care and nutrition, because they are the vehicle through which to educate future generations about the culture of sustainability, the fight against food waste, the drive for healthy eating, and the treatment of diseases through medicines, for example vaccines, that are often rejected by people in poor countries. In business, women are more oriented toward long-term and non-speculative investment. In finance, women have a low propensity for risk. For all these reasons, giving greater power to women in strategic roles in large global companies and in major scientific research institutions, as well as in small businesses, can help contribute to changing existing priorities. Next October 13, in Milan Expo 2015, thanks to a WIP initiative, WIP, as mentioned before, is the Women Parliamentarian Global Network, was I have the honor to be ambassador for Italy, shall be approved a resolution that commits every single female parliamentarian to propose and to support in their parliaments and toward the governments policies and actions I mentioned before. I strongly believe that it can be a powerful means to go ahead for achieving UNGD number 2 and number 4. And I'm sure as well that this session will produce new analysis and sound recommendations to policymakers. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much for this commitment to put also a bit of focus on the gender dimension of food security, food safety, and in addition to being an ambassador for women in Parliament, I suggest that you also become an ambassador for the blue numbers within the Women in Parliament network. Now, it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Minister Cao Duc Pat, Minister of Agriculture from Vietnam. Vietnam is a country that has an enormous amount of agricultural exports, agricultural trade, a country that is opening its trade and its economy. Minister, we are very eager to hear from you on how Vietnam is going to work with the SDGs.
Ladies and gentlemen, access to food is one of the fundamental rights of human, as stated in the first time in 1948 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and reaffirmed in the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights in 1966. Over the past decades, a lot of joint global efforts have been made to ensure food and nutrition security and reduce hunger and poverty in many countries. However, those efforts still confronting a number of challenges, especially in developing countries in Asia and the Pacific, where it is the home of 60% of the world population and 50% of the world food production. Currently, there are still millions hungry people, million children under 5 suffer malnutrition and underdevelopment. The potential hunger situation due to the deficiency of essential nutrients such as A vitamin, iron, and zinc is recorded as occurring to even larger number of people. The deterioration of arable land in area and fertility, scarcity of water for agricultural production, increasingly severity of negative impact of climate changes have become increasing challenges to ensure food security. Moreover, the declining investment in agriculture, barriers and subsidies are distorting the trade of agricultural products and posing more challenges to the assurance of food security in the region. In that context, the government of Vietnam welcome and appreciate the Zero Hunger Initiative introduced by the UN Secretary General to ensure a better life for every population in the world, with major pillars that ensure adequate food for all people and no prevalence of malnutrition among children under 2. Sustainable food production system, increased productivity and income for smallholders, producers, and no loss and waste of food. And from my experiences, I strongly believe that sustainable agriculture development is the best way to alleviate poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam is a small country with a natural area of 33 million hectares, of which only little more than 10 million hectares can be used for agricultural purposes. And Vietnam population is living mostly in countryside, 70% of them. And every year we have 1 more million people. Thanks to the reform and innovative policies initiated since 1986, Vietnam has shifted from a food importer to a large food exporter. In 1989, we still imported food, about 1 million tons. But in 2014, Vietnam exported more than 6.5 million tons of rice and other varieties of agricultural, forestry, and fishery products with the turnover of almost $31 billion. Poverty rate reduced from above 50% in early 1990s to now only 7.6%. And Vietnam basically achieved Millennium Development Goals launched by UN. Agriculture sector really support Vietnam to stand firm in the face of global and regional economic crisis, maintain economic growth of 5 to 7% per annum, secure its social stability, and contribute to poverty reduction fast. The core factor of the successes were: one, continuous strong commitment of the government to the sustainable agricultural development. Second, market-oriented policy reform with liberalization of agricultural inputs and output markets, redistribution of land to farmers for long-term usage. And third, increasing public investment in irrigation and rural infrastructure, research and extension. Ladies and gentlemen, for the time to come, Vietnam needs to make further effort to strengthen food security status, improve nutrition, and achieve sustainable agricultural development as SDG number 2 stated. For that purpose, Vietnam is carrying out a restructuring program for agriculture, aiming at increasing value added and sustainability. And the core measures in this process are: one, further policy reform to create more favorable environment for private investment in agriculture and enhancing value chains. Second, increase and restructure public investment, especially in infrastructure, research, and extension. At the same time, Vietnam advocates to strengthen further international cooperation and integration. We are negotiating and joining about 15 free trade agreements now, including Trans-Pacific Partnership. At the same time, over the past decades, Vietnam has shared its own experiences with other developing countries. We have dispatched a number of qualified experts together with new varieties and suitable technology to assist the implementation of food security program in some countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia through bilateral and South-South cooperation program supported and coordinated by FAO and other international partners. The government of Vietnam commits to continue our effort to working and cooperating with all countries in the world for ensuring global food security and nutrition. And ladies and gentlemen, at present, an important tool to implement the restructure program of agriculture is the public-private partnership. The PPP project was the key to enable good agriculture practices application, to establish the value chain for commodities, and to attract more private investment to agricultural sector. Since 2010, Vietnam has been promoting implementation of the initiative New Vision for Agriculture, initiated by World Economic Forum, aiming at achieving food security, increasing economic opportunity and sustainability of agriculture by more active cooperation between government and business community and other partners. A task force for Vietnam agriculture sustainable development was established with participation of around 20 multinational corporations and domestic company member of World Economic Forum. So far, About 7,000 farmers have participated in implementing PPP pilot scheme. The implementation results were very positive in terms of improving production management, science and technology application, better product quality, market expansion for agriculture, forestry and fishery products, increasing farmers' income and reduce emission as well. The pilot PPP project coffee led by Nestle, for example, has increased productivity of coffee by 10%, farmers' income by 14%, and reduced emission by 53%. After 4 years of implementation, Vietnam PPP model is highly appreciated by the World Economic Forum community. Now our main task is to scale up to reach not 7,000 but million farmers. In Vietnam alone, we have 14 million smallholders. Yeah. For this, further strong commitment by the government and more participation of businesses, farmers, and other partners, improve policy and legal framework, as well as financial and other support are needed. I thank you for your kind attention.
So, Minister, the task ahead of us is to make sure these 14 million farmers in Vietnam are recorded in the blue number system in the short term, because as you say, with 1 million new citizens coming into the market every year, the task is enormous. Let me now pass the floor on to the Secretary General of ASEAN, Mr. Lee Luong Min. ASEAN is a model of regional integration, is a model of having worked also in integrating better agricultural markets. Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for the opportunity to be part of this very important high-level session on achieving attitude in ASEAN to reflect on the capacity of ASEAN as the producer of various agricultural commodities to meet regional needs and the opportunities provided by the openness of markets in the ASEAN economic community for homegrown ASEAN agriculture and food processing industries. With many ASEAN economies, agricultural-based, ASEAN cooperation in food security and agriculture calling for strengthening regional cooperation in the areas of development, production, and promotion of food and agricultural products. Various measures and activities have been undertaken by ASEAN to ensure food security, enhance agricultural productivity, and maintain the sustainability of natural resources in our region. In recognition of the rapid changes in the global markets and their impact on the food and agricultural sectors, the ASEAN 1998 Hanoi Plan of Action called for enhancing food security and global competitiveness of ASEAN food, agriculture, and forestry products through developing appropriate technology to increase productivity and promoting intra- and extra-ASEAN trade and greater private sector investment in the food, agriculture, and forestry sectors. In response to the increasing concern on food security, the 2009 ASEAN Statement on Food Security was adopted to ensure long-term food security and improve the livelihood of farmers in ASEAN. And accordingly, the ASEAN Integrated Food Security Framework and its strategic plan of action on food security was launched at the 14th ASEAN Summit to support the development of agricultural productivity through greater investment, improve research and development, and strengthen farmers' organizations. Food, agriculture, and forestry sectors are given particularly important roles in the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint, and notably, ASEAN has a large surplus of rice that is exported around the world thanks to the significant output growth in the ASEAN member states. Overall food production in ASEAN has been faster than population growth, and it has kept pace with the demand, with ASEAN remaining a net exporter of food. And the world's top 10 rice exporting countries include 4 ASEAN member states, namely Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar. These 4 ASEAN countries supply nearly half of the global rice exports. And food crop production has increased substantially in recent years, primarily through productivity increases. And some ASEAN member states also continue to be large-scale exporter of rubber, palm oil, and a range of other agricultural products. ASEAN member states have managed to sustain output growth at an export at the healthy levels in the recent decades, thanks to the higher productivity from high-yielding varieties, the use of modern equipment, and improved irrigation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, since the adoption of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint, the overall structure of ASEAN economies has substantially changed. The share of the service sector steadily has increased to about 50% in 2014, while the agricultural sector share declined to 14.4%. The share of the industry sector broadly remained unchanged at 35.6%. The market opening under the ASEAN Economic Community is aimed at creating a single market and production base, among others, through the free flow of goods, including agricultural and food products. The removal of tariffs and continued streamlining of trade procedures have resulted in reduction of trade costs and giving competitive advantage to homegrown ASEAN agriculture and food processing industries in the regional market. Out of the 12 royalty integration sectors in ASEAN, 4 are related to food, agriculture, and forestry, namely agro-based products, wood-based products, rubber-based products, and fisheries. Integration is being accelerated and efforts focused to ensure the realization of potentials of these strategic sectors. ASEAN is not just looking at its internal market, it is also reaching out to the strategic trading partners by way of free trade and comprehensive economic partnership agreements to create better market conditions and opportunities for ASEAN products overseas. Trade facilitation initiative, particularly the harmonization of standards and technical regulations, as well as the development of guidelines, also enhance trade in food and agricultural products without compromising food and nutrition quality of these products. Much has been done under the ASEAN Economic Community in creating a basis towards global alignment beyond ASEAN's market to meet international standards. ASEAN has harmonized 885 markets to meet international standards. ASEAN has harmonized 885 maximum residue limits of commodity and commonly used pesticide for widely rated crop products. And as ASEAN aspires to move up the value chain to higher value additional activities, work on prepared foodstuff has also been intensified. To date, 6 guidelines of ASEAN food control requirements have been finalized, and work on harmonizing food safety standards is also making good progress, with the ASEAN maximum level of food additives now finalized and the harmonization of food contaminants and food contract material is ongoing. The improvement in product and production processes alone is not sufficient to ensure that products will be competitive once they reach the market. Products have to travel distances. For perishable and time-sensitive products like agro products or prepared food. Good connectivity, including air connectivity, allows product to reach the destination faster and with best quality. Infrastructure development in transport and logistics services as part of the ASEAN Economic Community Initiative has resulted in better food transportation and hence reducing food waste and food transportation costs from producers to consumers, thus making food more affordable to consumers and reducing loss to products and to the producers. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the recent 37th meeting of the ASEAN Ministers on Agriculture and Forestry in September 2015 issued a statement on agriculture and forestry, on food security and nutrition, which set out the key strategies for action at both national and regional levels to effectively address the present and emerging threat to food security and to meet adequate nutrition for all the people of ASEAN. The statement will contribute to the implementation of the SD2 on ending hunger, achieving food security and improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture in ASEAN region. And as we move closer to the formal establishment of the ASEAN community, among them the ASEAN Economic Community, ASEAN will continue to strengthen its agriculture and food processing industries, including through the implementation of the ASEAN Economic Community Initiative. In realizing its post-2015 vision that we are now developing for endorsement by the leaders of ASEAN by the end of this year in the context of the second ASEAN Summit in 2015, ASEAN will continue to play an active role in supporting and coordinating with dialogue partners and other partners, regional and international organizations and institutions to facilitate and drive the cooperation in food and agriculture forward. I thank you, and I wish the forum great success.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. So what we have learned is of the efforts at the governmental and intergovernmental level to establish a stronger agricultural market, so starting first by looking at the internal ASEAN market, but then moving also to look at external markets with a big trade component and with all the connected issues of standard certification, trade facilitation. We are now going to zoom in, listening to speakers from Malaysia, from Vietnam, from Germany, from Norway, as well as colleagues from Rome and Geneva. Let me start with Mod Aslan Abdul Jalil, who's the General Manager of the Rural Transformation Center of Johor State in Malaysia. This is a state that is in the south of Malaysia, bordering with the north of Singapore, and very working a lot in tapping into the potential of the rural communities. The floor is yours, Mod, to tell us a little bit what you're doing.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman. Aslan from Johor RTC of Malaysia. And like been mentioned, I'd like to share our views and experience in experimenting the implementation of blue numbers since Dr. Puwan introduced us in the last April in the Johor State. And it's all about how we capitalizing this program into the people, into the heart of the people, so that they can understand and then they can embark in this journey together with us, so that the one that changed their life is actually not us, but themselves. So let me share something. Okay, next. We all know that capital economy is all about GDP growth and big business, large public and private investment projects and financial market, whereas the people's economy is all about wage and growth, small medium enterprise, household expenditure, cost of living, jobs and family well-being. And Malaysia have taken a step that since 2011, National Blue Ocean Strategy under Professor Chang Kim have created a program that to be a strategic linchpin that connects between the people's economy and the capital's economy. So, back. So as we can see that there's 4 principles that being used by the National Blue Ocean Strategy. That is, first is the high impact, rapid execution, low cost, and sustainable. And we have about around 6 transformation centers that being promoting heavily in doing transforming this to cater having a healthy, educated, and high income citizen living together in sustainable environment. So our main pillars is actually education and upskilling, entrepreneurship, integrated development, safety and security, lowering costs of living. RTC Johor been established to plan, execute, and monitor the people's economy strategies and issues, especially for rural areas. RTC itself stands for Rural Transformation Center, and we are not just policy maker, but we also the implementer next to the people itself. Can I play the video, please? I just compress everything in one video, that so you may understand what we are doing actually. I think it's not playing. So this is also called technological. Okay. So this is our basic strategic linkages model between the transformation center in Malaysia. This is our key performance index, having this agriculture to be passed between rural and urban areas. You can see the connection between the many rural transformation centers through these 6 coordination points. The first is to have a high value community farming projects. It's called coordination point 1. Connected through these collection and distribution centers around Johor. Now we are talking about single logistic system and fair price product between the farmers and the markets. Installing the marketplace, the online marketplace. We have our own eputra.my, we have Facebook, we have Instagram and so on. We do that. To capitalizing low cost, we do some agri-zone, special agri-zone. And last but not least, this is the heart of everything. Everyone is volunteer to be in this system. Then that's actually what makes the RTC Johor can get everyone involved in this so-called Blue Numbers initiative. Okay, we get back into the presentation. Next. Okay, straight to the point. My Blue Numbers have been implemented in our ICT framework. As you can see, we gain knowledge, we gain the data created from this marketplace, from the supplier, supply chain, and so on. Must be put into one repository data. That's, you can see the My Blue Numbers is already there. And then from this Blue Numbers, you know that data is essential. Data is king. And so we use the data given, and then this Blue Numbers should fit in our ICT framework. Next. I think you have. Okay, next. So basically, what Blue Numbers actually does and will do to us is to making, our aim is actually to making food components such as crops, livestock, and agriculture more efficient by 30%, and including those biotechnology items. We are focusing on small farms for bigger improvement. We want to improve biofarming skills and process. We want to create more high-value activity to increase farmers' income through bioeconomy for food industry. So my blue numbers is actually the catalyst from the original high-value commodity farming. We're going to be using the my blue numbers to actually scale up the income of the farmers inside Johor. Next. We have already our own domain, www.mybluenumber.com. That is our system. Actually, we have already the registration system. We try to integrate. With the original system that we have. Way forward, by 2015, we want to register 10,000 effective. We are talking about effective registered farmers. We just not want some sleeping partners inside those systems. And 300,000 in 2008. For your information, in Johor only there is about 490,727 farmers in Johor Southern region only that inside those systems. So we need to get them involved in those systems. We need to promote my blue numbers to other states in Malaysia through emboss and RTC linkages. To work with Malaysian government and private sectors to strengthen the my blue numbers and integration with national planning. To work with telco for connectivity and technology integration. For information, we already engaged with DG of Telenor to get together in incentivize the farmers through some kind of technology. Thank you, Telenor. We like to work with bank for startup fund and expansion fund to organize international conference on Blue Ocean Strategy, Food Security and My Blue Numbers will be held this coming January in Kuala Lumpur. To settle the My Blue Number system through various program and facilities, to work with universities to establish simple mobile e-learning system through big data and IoT integration, to create brand trust, to work together with NGC, ASEAN countries to promote blue numbers. And now, we also work closely with this with Emery. Thank you, Emery, for supporting us in to create those impact, especially for farmers that plant the palm oil. So that's all. Thank you very much.
So here we are. His RTC has taken the blue numbers and put it in practice from the beginning, embedding it in the company, making sure the data supports the system up to producing results. I am absolutely speechless by listening to this. Well done. Now we are going to hear from Ramesh Khanna. He's the CEO of Emery Oleochemicals Group, producing chemicals made from natural oils and fats. We want to hear from you how you intend to use this Blue Number initiative in order to better leverage intra-ASEAN trade, but maybe also, following what we've heard from the Minister and the Secretary General, move beyond the ASEAN region. Ramesh?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Emery Oleochemicals is a 175-year-old company. We started life in the city of Cincinnati in the state of Ohio, and today we're domiciled, our headquarters is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Makes us quite unique. We're actually more than an ASEAN multinational, we're a true global multinational. And that allows me to gain, I guess, some unique insights into what's happening around the world and how we see things working out in ASEAN. We have let me talk a little bit about Emery first. We have a number of business segments. A key segment for us is the agricultural product segment. We call it the agro-green segment. Today we are working on a number of low toxicity products that includes biopesticides and products that help reduce the abiotic stresses on crops. And I think this is what Dr. Muhammad just referred to. We're working closely with various local communities, farming communities, in countries as diverse as Sri Lanka, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, where we have a healthy pipeline of product development. Our participation in the Blue Numbers programs been extremely useful, and I foresee a lot more to come out of that because it allows me to learn about the needs of local farming communities and then to feed that into our development pipeline. So that's very interactive, it's very real, and it's very useful. our participation in the Blue Numbers program is also consistent with one of our sustainability pillars, which is about ensuring sustainable product stewardship. So all in all, that works very, very well. I find it interesting in all of the conversation today that we've not maybe just said a few things explicitly. Number one, 2/3 of the world's hungry sit in Asia. So there's about 1 billion hungry people in the world, and 2/3 of them sit in Asia. All right. At the same time, we variously hear people talk about ASEAN and this region being the food bowl of the region and the food bowl of this planet, and I see a serious disconnect. I see it's a serious disconnect. I'm speaking solely from the perspective of a businessman. We have a business to run. We're not a charity. We want to work with local farmers in as cliche as it sounds, in a win-win relationship. So why the disconnect? I see a paradigm of poverty, and I call it a paradigm because it is a paradigm. It ends up being a vicious circle, and with all vicious circles, there's always a way out. And in this instance, I think it's either going to be a very healthy public-private sector collaboration, or it will be what I would sadly call an unhealthy private sector-only led initiative, where all of the gains then go solely to the private sector. So let me elaborate a little bit more. Climate change in the region has had a significant and devastating impact. I think I'm speaking to the converted here. Soil contamination, droughts, changing temperatures, they've all had a big impact on farmers there, particularly farmers who have not had the ability, the opportunity to embrace A, technology, B, support of governments to help mitigate some of these risks. So what we have is climate change impacting yields, essentially. So volatility in yields means volatility in earnings. So we're getting into a vicious circle here. Volatility in earnings means it's not going to be that easy to go down to your local bank to seek financing. Right? Our financing infrastructure is still fairly traditional, and we don't like volatility in earnings. So here are two opportunities for the public sector, for governments, and I would look specifically at the Asian Economic Community when we speak about the ASEAN region to do more on those first 2 points, providing an infrastructure to help with things as domestic, as irrigation, early warning systems, to mitigate some of the impact of climate change. And then, of course, on the financing side, and there is a lot that we could be doing. Now, once we address these issues, we then address the next issue. So we've got climate change, which is about yields and volatility. Then we have financing. The next one's technology. Without financing, you're not in the technology game. Your practices remain fairly archaic. And this is a space where I believe there's a need for private sector involvement. And I'm proud to say that I think we're doing it. But again, it's not a charity. We're not going to go in there and do this for incredibly altruistic reasons. And if there's private sector support, public sector support, up to that point, yields, volatility, funding, then the private sector can actively get involved in investing in R&D alongside the farmers. As I said earlier, we're working with Blue Numbers to actively identify the needs of certain local farming communities. Some of the stuff we're working on may not be applicable across the region or indeed the planet, but they will work for a particular community. And that's equally important to us. So we get into a technology game. You're not there without the money, and this requires both public and private sector involvement. Then move down to the next point, and again, from a hard-nosed business perspective, your unit cost of production. Without technology, your unit cost of production is going to remain high. It's going to remain high. Margins will get squeezed for our farmers. And what we've been seeing, is then farm produce being sold to fairly affluent countries. Right? The affluent countries, because you've got in your value chain a degree of inefficiency, which raises your production cost, skinny margins, all up making for an expensive product, still affordable to an affluent Western country, still affordable, and the product leaves their shores and at the expense of local consumption. And this exacerbates this issue of poverty. Again, with technology, you get to drive down unit cost of production, you still maintain a healthy margin, but the overall value chain is a little bit compressed, and you make it available increasingly at a more affordable price to local communities. Right? And that's again part of the vicious circle. And the last point, and maybe I digress a little bit, but it concerns me, is the fragmentation or the discontinuity in supply chains. So we have all of this happening out there. I remain a little bit, I won't say critical. I'd like to see more being done from the AEC. And I think if we don't get our act together, we will see, forced upon the farmers, the big companies, the big supermarket chains, right? They will play the role of aggregator. They may or may not buy from smallholders, and we put smallholders at risk. They may likely help with the introduction of new technology and fill all of those gaps that I think the public sector ought to be playing. And the difference is, while they will do as good a job, the gains are not going to go back to the local community in the same shape or form. It will go back to shareholders sitting outside. So on that note, and I've got the red card, I'll conclude by saying I think we have a long way to go. Everything we've heard has been very, very aspirational. There's still work to be done.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. Now we're running we're going to be running shortly out of time. I want people to be sharp and to the point so that we can get all the different perspectives. I want to give the floor to Ian Hope-Johnston, who's the Global Director for Sustainable Agriculture in Pepsico, another global company who's been at the initiation of this project. Ian.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to reinforce the collective weight of some of the topics we've been discussing today, and I think PepsiCo is one of those companies that engaged in the development of the FAE, the Food and Agricultural Business Principles. And I want to underline that effort, because what that gave us was consistency of content. It allowed us all to come together, and we actually responded to a request from the farming communities worldwide of a duplication of effort that was taking place. I think the Food and Agricultural Business Principles was actually be able to give that consistency, and from PepsiCo's perspective was very consistent in the content that was woven into its strategic framework with regards to what we call our performance with purpose. From that point, I want to reference now the blue numbers. It provides an anchor for this whole process where the private sector can actually engage in a level of consistency, and we've heard from the certification authorities and organizations this morning like Global Gap and Control Union, who work on behalf of the private sector, like companies like PepsiCo, of engaging the farming community in these supply chains. But really those blue numbers, when you look at the information we are collecting, provides an anchor and a repository for us to look and get access to that information. From PepsiCo's perspective, it allows us then to identify the individual challenges and opportunities in countries over a global sourcing program, which includes a very strong association with the Asian countries. But it allows us to individually look at those challenges and opportunities in building resilience. And I applaud, and I think everybody understands the level of volatility through climate change that we are seeing as amongst the many other challenges. But what the blue numbers does in extension of that, it enables to consolidate that information so we can collectively understand the visibility of who else is sourcing in those particular areas, and be able to understand not what PepsiCo can invest in, but also the private, and then the Honourable Minister highlighted it, the collective weight of the public sector as well. And so we can actually use inaccessible data to date for active data for investment purposes. And I think that's very, very important. So I think from PepsiCo's perspective, we acknowledge the blue numbers and we find this a very important opportunity to wire the visibility of our collective sourcing programs. And we start at the farm base. We start at the farm base because unless we have a sustainable farming operation within a sustainable community, we will not be able to create a sustainable crop. So therefore, I believe I just want to reinforce the collective efforts of the ability of working with the UN Global Compact and ITC, not just to provide this consistency, but also look at actually being able to manage effectively the data that we can then engage government, academia, the financial institutions, the NGO community, all who are represented in this room, to actually make sustainable SDG 2 more of a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. So let's gather the data so that we can do good data mining. Josefina Stubbs. Josefina is a director in IFAD, and she's going to tell us a little bit, zooming into the ASEAN region. Josefina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I have had the pleasure of sitting throughout this conference, and it made me really think about when we all started 20 years ago, discussing the importance of smallholder farmers in the market, and now we are sitting in the United Nations with an SDG 2, with commitment not only from the NGO community, where I started, Oxfam, but also commitment from governments and the private sector. So I think that we not only know a lot of how to do it, we have the right actors at the table to really do it and make it to the next level. I do believe that the greatest challenge for us is now to scale up what we are doing. As the Minister well said, I mean, we have a number of pilot programs, which we should stop calling them pilots, in order to really learn from them, understand what works and what doesn't work, and then bring them to a higher scale. In Vietnam, we still have 14 million smallholder farmers, poor, that have to be taken out of poverty, but we clearly know, or at least are in a better position now than what we were before, to take them out of poverty. IFAD has been working for 40 years in many countries of the world. In the ASEAN countries, one of the sort of key areas for us. We do understand then that the challenge of bringing people out of poverty and the number of malnourished children in Asia is really very high. But we also look at Asia as an opportunity, both for smallholder farmers as well as for countries and industries which are operating in the region. We work in Malaysia, we work in Indonesia in the cocoa sector with companies like Mars, who have been really making an enormous difference for smallholder farmers to learn. I think I want to take back two or three of the principles that our president, when he spoke to this audience. One, for IFAD, smallholder farming is a business. It's not a charity, it's a business. And as such, smallholder farmers also want to make profit and must make profit, not only because they need to feed themselves, but they also have to buy from the market in order to feed themselves, and they need resources. Second, the principle for IFAD that strong market linkages are absolutely the key in really putting the smallholder farmers and pulling all the actors into really making a difference. The strong market linkages are not only on a supply side, but also on a demand side. When consumers are demanding to know where your cup of coffee is coming from, you are exercising a pull effect into the community so that we bring them to the market. And third, I think that farmers' organization, again and again and again, we say is absolutely essential. It's the way to transfer capacities, which are so important for them to be able to be in the market. And we believe that, supporting smallholder farmers as part of technological transfer is absolutely essential. And we do celebrate the new ethics of the private sector, which is getting more mature. In us, we are learning more and more how to do it better. And I think it's not only a matter of moral ethics, it's a matter of win-win situations for business, for all the business people who are involved, starting with the smallholder farmers and our colleagues from Nestle and Pepsi. I think that in looking at the challenges of scaling up, I have two or three things which I would very quickly refer to. I think that in really deepening and scaling up, we need to learn what we have done, understand why it works and why it doesn't work, because we have a body of knowledge at the moment. And I'm very glad that the gentleman from Emery Oleochemicals was already starting that dialogue. How do we go deeper into finding ways in which the private sector, the technological transfer, the smallholder farmers, and the governments can all move to the next level. But for that, we need to really understand and really deal with something which we find is really strong, and is this perception of risk. When you invest in the smallholder farmers, well, it's risk. So their loans are more expensive because the banks consider them risky. The insurance companies don't want to go into smallholder farmers because they are risky. I don't know, the government sometimes don't want to go too far because it's risky. So I think we need to really work on this perception of risk as the only way to understand that these are business opportunities that we need to go forward. How to overcome that perception is part of the work we have to do. We need to reduce the cost of doing business for smallholder farmers. How long it takes to a cooperative to get a legal recognition? Probably 4 times more than what would take to a sort of medium-scale cooperative. We need to work on that, because at the end of the day, we want them in the market. We also want to be able to have better data to count for not only how much supply they produce, but also how much employment they are creating. How much benefit and technology they are coming to they are helping to bring to the farm, because we need to demonstrate once and again that working in rural development and investing in smallholder farmers is a way to help the national growth, the national economy of a country. At the moment, we have stayed with smallholder farmers as if they are isolated, working there, but every smallholder farmers that export coffee in Vietnam pay taxes, is contributing to the national growth. And then again, probably the last, which is also important too, one, the importance of governments. I mean, none of this scaling up can happen without the right policy environment, without the right decisions that can benefit and level the field playing for everybody, and that is the role of the state, if it works through and becomes a catalyst of investment. So national and regional level governance structures are absolutely fundamental in making it happen. And then, as someone mentioned here, the power of the companies. The companies are also there to educate, to establish bridges and dialogue with government, to create the right environment for what we are doing now at a small scale level, which we call a pilot, can really become sort of a scale-up, big way of achieving this very ambitious SDG 2 that we all have ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we have a challenge of listening to first Mr. Wu Tien Loc, who's the chairman and president of Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm Nguyện Quang Vinh. I'm the Deputy Secretary General of Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and authorized by our president, who's unable to be here today. So VCCI is pleased to be here to work with the ITC and UN Global Compact to implement the project. And I think that it is our privilege, to work with the Vietnamese authority in Vietnam, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Planning and Investment, who are responsible for the development of businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses in Vietnam, to involve in the project. So I want to share with you that VCCI is working with UN Global Compact, and I'm also the representative of Global Compact Vietnam Network, which has been established in the year 2007. We work with the UN to set it up. And to promote, one of the key, tasks of Global Compact Vietnam Network is to work with, ITC to promote the implication of food and agriculture business principle of in ASEAN region, and the FAB are being built based on the criteria which are simple and easily approach our own objective of the value chain of agriculture production. So this, includes a number of activity that we have been working on the preparatory phase, such as being a database of agriculture businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, and farmer. Each SME and farmer will be provided an account of international trade by blue number by International Trade Center. By using this account, SME farmer can volunteer information about themselves, create a sustainability profile on their products, services, and capacity, including for export and trade. Customer, importer, therefore, can be easily trace the origin as well as the current farming practices. Secondly, the standard of each agricultural sector will be updated regularly by International Trade Center. They say suitability with different importer market also review automatically by ITC. And small and medium-sized enterprises will be well trained to apply the standard which are most suitable with their businesses. And I think that during the implementation of the project, SME and farmer will be well trained to use data provided by International Trade Center to apply each individual standard, to apply the standard framework of United Nations on producing agricultural products, doing agri-sustainability along the value chain. So I think at the same time, apart from the working with ITC and Global Compact to implement this project, so that in the next 3 years we have at least 5,000 of SME of Vietnam and farmer. Among other, our minister mentioned that 14 million of farmer and smallholder to be given blue number. And I think based on that, we can mobilize, Vietnamese ICT company and not only small and medium-sized enterprises in Vietnam, but big and multinational corporations in Vietnam to be involved in the project. So for the time being, we also work with a number of non-governmental agencies to implement, to support businesses in developing a number of inclusive business model. Especially, we also work on a number of pilot inclusive business projects with 2 key export products, catfish and shrimp. And last but not least, we also work with AIT, quite famous university in Vietnam, is to build a framework for sustainable consumption and production, which are piloted in the tea industry. So that's very shortly for your information. We are willing to share with you information at a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General. Thank you also for being brief. Now, we need to hear from Christian, from Ragnhild, and then final 2 seconds from Joe. And that in no more than 10 minutes. Christian,
well,
President
thank you.
and CEO of Global Gap.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for being here. I will not double speed this to get it through. I just abstained from my writing and put it to the main notes. We've heard already all of the areas. As Rana said, we have a certain paradigm. I think all what we're talking here is thinking about how we adapt or change the model to actually scale up. We had it in one way going with a bridge. I mean, there have been many bridges and there have been many islands, and these were not in a coordinated way, and we haven't really addressed that one piece. We had so many different good incentives that they were just not coordinated. And that means we didn't have a good map, and it wasn't even able to map. So there was a smallholder or anyone wasn't been able to go and meet the market, even when they wanted to start building their bridge from the other side. But on the other hand, there are already some bridges. 20 years ago, when Global Gap started, we built a bridge between retailers and farmers. And we made this as a mainstream. Today, we have GS1 numbers, or in the family of GS1 numbers, so it's a predecessor of the blue number. We have 150,000 farms. 100,000 are in small farmers in groups. Some countries have 100% compliance in some commodities with a standard for good agricultural practice, sustainable farming. So we are having responses that work. We have bridges that already work, but obviously 150,000 farms, sorry, yes, I mean that is so little. Even though in the ASEAN region, Vietnam is our biggest partner and we team up and we do private-public partnerships. One of our responses is we need to team up with recognition of government standards. China GAP, Viet GAP. We have those solutions, but that still isn't there where we want it, because governments are not necessarily trusting the private sector. And vice versa. Industry, the retailers and others don't trust necessarily the government. So how do we change the paradigm? And that is what we started last year with this declaration of Abu Dhabi. And I'm so proud that ITC was partnering with this, and that Psy platform, that means the Nestle's and Unilever's are part of this and signatories, but also retailers. So we have the first time public sector, Vietnam, the country, signing up as well with the Department of Fisheries. We have governments, we have retailers, manufacturers signing up jointly, and farmers, to find a new process to align, to build bridges also to different islands in the same matter. Because what we all think is harmonization will help. But harmonization understood only this one bridge, and the bridge can only be this high. No, I think we need differentiation. How would governments want to differentiate in export markets? How would retailers differentiate if we all talk about one harmonization level? No, we need to change. We need to look at the language, how we harmonize, but then allow on that basis, with blue numbers for traceability, with same construction engineers and oversight, opportunity for differentiation, so that farmers can respond on all these and to all these different levels. And that's what we created, and I'm proud that with the cooperation with UNDP, with the blue number, one of our 3 targets already have been achieved. So a new initiative, less than a year, done. One thing. We will do with the help of ITC in January, so 1.5 years later. It's promised by Joe. Thank you, Rancha. We will have the first one, also the language with the standards map, to build a library of standards, because standards should be open source. And the last thing, we will work all together, but I will do that next year at this place, how we actually make sure that we all comply and say what we do to the consumer. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Rankled Matteson, Director of Governmental Relations of the Telenor Group, Norway. This is the technology infrastructure that we were talking about.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to say a few words. Telenor Group is one of the world's major mobile operator, and we are present in 13 markets in Europe and in Asia. We have 189 million customers, and about close to 170 million of those are in our 6 Asian countries. And our journey in Asia started with an investment in Bangladesh back in 1996. And we basically made a bet that mobile phones were not going to remain a luxury item, but was something that would become relevant and affordable to everyone. And it started with village phone ladies who became the information hub of their local community in Bangladesh. And today, Grameenphone, our company in Bangladesh, has 52 million customers and is the largest company in Bangladesh. So that's how it started. As we all know, about 4.4 billion people in the world are still unconnected. And Telenor's key strategic ambition is Internet for all, and that is based on our belief that the Internet must be accessible to everyone. And this drives our company's focus on providing innovative telecommunications and digital services based on actual needs of people. And hopefully that we can also be able to transform the lives of individuals. And we obviously as a company take encouragement from the new global goals of the United Nations, and we are also confident that communications, technology and mobile can help out in realizing these important goals. And we're talking a lot this morning and now today about partnerships, and I just want to briefly mention 2 initiatives that we're working on, because we're occupied by working with experienced partners that have the capacity to bring about lasting change. And we're currently working on 2 initiatives together with organizations, academia, and local authorities, promoting development and leveraging our core services. And that is, one thing is the DTAC Smart Farmer program in Thailand. Our company there, DTAC, has since 2008 worked to empower Thai farmers
by extending agricultural information and knowledge through mobile internet, and we'll be talking a lot about that today. So I will not go into detail of that, but of course the aim is to encourage sustainable practices among the agricultural value chain, and the partner with DTAC here is the government through the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives in Thailand as well. And it was also mentioned by Dr. Aslan also that DIGI, our company in Malaysia, is participating in the Blue Number initiative, signed a memorandum of understanding to be the Malaysian connectivity partner of this initiative in Malaysia. We're obviously very excited about that, and we heard details also about that earlier. Lastly, just before I finish up, I also want to mention briefly that in our wish to engage with pressing issues, which also led us to work within research. And we have a study, Impacts of Human Mobility on the Emergence of Dengue Epidemics in Pakistan. And this study analyzed anonymous call data from more than 30 million Telenor Pakistan subscribers during the 2013 dengue outbreak, using the large volume of data to accurately map the geographic spread of timing of the epidemic. And why am I mentioning this? Yes, because we can here see a combination of private sector data and used for the purpose of here try to prevent, if possible, or better to see the relationship between seasonal movements and the outbreak of the epidemics, and might be able to, for the government to put into place effective countermeasures before it becomes an epidemic. So this is just to shed light on the opportunities here for big data. So thank you for this opportunity to talk.
Thank you. Thank you. And the 2 seconds commercial for Joe, who is the head of the Trade for Sustainable Development and Standards Map program at ITC, and together with Puban, the brain behind putting this in ITC. Joe.
Thanks, Arantxa. Is that on? Okay. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes discussing the next steps and how we can actually see and operationalize the Blue Number initiative. So if I could have the first slide, please. Okay. So basically, we're talking about the profiles of the farmers. So there's 2 profiles, a public profile and a private. Okay. You can think of the public profile as kind of a macro and meso view. These are very simple 5 data points: the name of the farmer, their gender, what they produce, their contact information, email, phone, SMS, and then lastly, their geolocation coordinates. This is a public tool. It's open to governments. It's really not a commercial entity. It's not a commercial type of operation, and all entities are equal. Then below that, you have the private or the micro view, which is the private profile, which can be shared with a variety of different business partners. And you can see the components of the private profiles there. This is important because, again, we're looking at farmers, and we're allowing them to choose who they can share their information with and what to share. So really, what is necessary to show what you're doing, declaring your good practices to your business partners. Next slide, please. So this is a macro view of the data we have collected. So basically, we have over 60,000 farms worldwide across many different continents. And if you would look in, you would see obviously these 5 data points provided if you would scroll over the various points in terms of gender, in terms of product, location, things like that. Next view, please. Next slide. This is the meso view looking at the FNC coffee data in Colombia. So you can see the different colors represents blue for female farmers, green for male farmers, various details on their operations. So this is interesting because it allows a further, say, granular level of information. Next slide, please. Again, meso view, other types of information that can be analyzed. So for example, the issues we heard earlier today about land tenure, land rights, for example, or to verify a claim. Was the land not deforested? Things like that. These are interesting pieces of information to share with buyers that talk about the attributes of the actual farm. Next slide, please. This is an example of the Johor State data we have working with RTC. We discussed that earlier in today's session, but again, these are a representation of various producers of vegetables, seafood, palm oil, other types of products. Next slide, please. And then finally, the micro view. So this is more or less the sustainability profile or the dashboard. So this is where we can actually share the information on the farmer. And this is very key in the sense of farmers can choose what to share with whom. They can use the existing tools that ITC has at its disposal in terms of standards map and the sustainability exchange to conduct self-assessments against over 180 standards or codes of conduct today, to access training materials, and to link to buyers. So again, the idea here is leveraging the various tools we have, and also connecting with various standard organizations and retailer codes. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide in terms of showing what the platform, the potential of the platform, how we can really grow farmers in terms of understanding what their certification profiles are, moving beyond baseline codes to more, let's say, national codes or voluntary standards, tracking this information, understanding what kind of trainings they need, identifying farmer needs, building trust, all this type of discussions that we've had this morning. And also looking at data, for example, on investment decisions, and finally, and most importantly, perhaps tracking progress on dealing with food security issues. So what are the next steps? So right now the registry is online, as we discussed earlier, and Miguel mentioned this, and also with FNC. We have the registry online working with GS1. We have over 60,000 farmers currently in the system. The next steps through the end of this year and into 2016 are to onboard more farmers, working with key partners, whether that's the private sector, whether that's working with standards, whether that's working with UN Global Compact national platforms or others, to onboard farmers and then launch the sustainability marketplace that I showed a few slides ago in the first quarter of 2016. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a long morning. We hope it's been useful in shedding light into this initiative to make sure we implement good on SDG 2. Let me thank the UN Global Compact, Women in Parliament. Let me thank IFAD. Let me thank the Minister of Vietnam, the Secretary General of ASEAN. Let me thank all the private sector and NGOs around the table. Thank you for being in this with us, and the marching orders now are clear. Scale this up. Thank you.